I never thought the slab in the middle of the dining room would be the key to my grandmother's safe deposit box. When the wine spilled across the cream tablecloth, I saw my future flash before me. It was not an apology I saw, but a signature. She forgot one simple thing. Fingers leave fingerprints, and morality clauses leave consequences. My name is Isabel Duke. I am 32 years old, and I build bridges. Not metaphorical ones, real ones. Steel, concrete, tension cables. The kind of infrastructure that stops a town from flooding or connects a rural community to a hospital. My company, Northline Structures, which I co-founded 5 years ago, specializes in civil infrastructure. We bid on municipal contracts. We design storm-proof housing for coastal areas. My hands smell like rebar and industrial soap, not perfume. I live in Fairview Springs, a town that presents itself as a peaceful postcard of suburban America. Manicured lawns, quiet streets, a strong PTA, but beneath that veneer, it operates on a different kind of infrastructure. Gossip, reputation, and a quiet, brutal social hierarchy. It is a town of whispers and veiled competition, and in that ecosystem, I am an anomaly. I deal in physics, not appearances. My family, or what remains of it, is complicated. My father, Thomas Duke, is a good man who owns a small, beloved coffee shop downtown. He smells like roasted beans and cinnamon, and he possesses a profound, almost tragic inability to handle confrontation. Then there is his wife, my stepmother, Vivian Ashford Duke. Vivian lives and breathes the social hierarchy of Fairview Springs. Her entire existence is curated for public consumption. Her career is managing her image and climbing ladders that only she can see. And then there is her daughter, my stepsister, Jade. At 27, Jade is a smaller, paler reflection of her mother, floating by on a vague job description of freelance PR and her mother's coattails. I am, thankfully, completely financially independent. My work at Northline is demanding, but it is successful. It has allowed me to do things like pay for my father's new roof 2 winters ago, and the complete electrical rewiring of his house last year, and the new high-efficiency boiler when the old one gave out. These were not gifts, exactly, but investments in my father's comfort, paid directly to the contractors. There were no loan agreements, no paperwork signed between us. He is my father. You do not send your father an invoice for keeping his house from falling down. Vivian, of course, sees my work differently. In her world, if it does not involve a gala or a press mention, it is not real. She refers to Northline Structures, a company that employs 22 people and bids on multi-million-dollar state contracts. As my little project, I have heard her say it at town functions, her voice dripping with condescension masked as affection. Oh, Isabel is so dedicated to her little building project, it keeps her busy. While she dismisses my career, she simultaneously leverages my father's assets, or rather, the assets I helped preserve, to fund her climb. She has been systematically pushing him to spend, to upgrade, to live according to a luxury standard his small coffee shop could never support. New cars, imported furniture, and endless renovations to the house I practically grew up in. The whispers in Fairview Springs are not just about her spending. The rumors follow Vivian like a shadow. She is on the board of several charity funds, opaque organizations funded exclusively by her small circle of wealthy friends. The money raised at lavish brunches seems to disappear into a fog of administrative fees and consulting charges. It is the kind of polite, sophisticated grift that thrives in towns like this. I have always kept my distance. My focus is my work. I find solace in blueprints, in the clear, undeniable truth of mathematics. A load-bearing wall either holds or it fails. Concrete cures at a predictable rate. The world Vivian inhabits, a world of nuance, insinuation, and strategic lies, feels like quicksand to me. I prefer solid ground. My typical week involves site visits, budget reviews, and arguing with zoning commissions about culvert specifications. I am usually finalizing bids for highway overpasses or designing foundations for hurricane-prone regions. My life is steel-toed boots and hard hats. Then the invitation arrived. It was not a text or a casual phone call. It was a heavy cream-colored cardstock, thick enough to stop a bullet, with embossed gold lettering. Vivian was hosting Thanksgiving. This was not a cozy family gathering. The implied guest list, which she had Jade casually text to my father so he could prepare the right coffee blends, was a who's who of Fairview Springs' financial scene. Local entrepreneurs, real estate brokers with portfolios full of commercial properties, and the managers of the very funds Vivian was rumored to be manipulating. It was a performance, a networking event disguised with turkey and stuffing. My first instinct was to decline. I had a feasibility study for a new bridge in West Virginia I could use as an excuse. The thought of spending an evening listening to Vivian hold court, watching her flatter and manipulate, made my stomach turn. But 2 days later, something else arrived. It was an email, sent to my Northline work address. There was no subject line. The sender was an unidentifiable string of letters and numbers from a Proton Mail account. The message was 6 words long. Watch the kitchen and the house papers. I stared at the screen for a long time. It was the kind of message that could be a prank, a mistake, or a warning. But the specificity of it, the kitchen, sent a chill through me. Vivian had just completed a massive, obscenely expensive renovation of the kitchen, the one I had paid to rewire just a year prior. I logged into an old bank account, a joint savings account my father and I had kept open since I was in college. It was supposed to be for household emergencies. I rarely checked it. My blood ran cold. There was a transfer, a large one, made 3 weeks ago. It was not a payment to a known contractor or a utility company. It was a single, lump sum payment to an entity I had never heard of, Ashford Design Logistics, LLC. It took me less than 10 minutes to run a business search. Ashford Design Logistics was a newly formed shell company. The registered agent was a woman named Portia Vale, one of Vivian's closest friends and a prominent real estate broker who was, I knew, on the guest list for Thanksgiving. The amount of the transfer was precise, $58,200. It was the exact amount I had spent on the boiler, the wiring, and the roof. The email, the kitchen, the house papers, the shell company, the transfer. This was not a renovation. It was a theft. Vivian was not just spending my father's money. She was draining the equity from the house, laundering money through her friend's company, and she had somehow used the money I put into the house as a baseline. She was preparing to sell the house, or leverage it, and she was cleaning out the accounts first. I closed my laptop. The hum of the server room at my office suddenly felt deafening. The vague disgust I usually felt for Vivian crystallized into something hard and cold. Resolve. The Thanksgiving dinner was no longer an invitation. It was a summons. Vivian was not just putting on a performance. She was setting a stage. She thought I was just the quiet, boring engineer daughter, too busy with my little project to notice. She thought I was a spectator. She was wrong. I opened my calendar and confirmed my attendance. I would be there, and I would not be coming as a guest. I was coming prepared for a structural inspection. I was going to find every crack in her facade, and I was going to see just how much weight it could bear before it all came crashing down. The discovery of the transfer to Ashford Design Logistics changed everything. The number, $58,200, was not random. It was precise. It was my number. I spent the next morning not at a construction site, but digging through my own digital archives. I run my company meticulously. I keep records of everything. I pulled the invoices for my father's house, the ones I had paid directly to the subcontractors years ago. The new boiler installation, $12,500. The emergency roof repair after that terrible ice storm, $22,000. The complete electrical rewiring of the aging circuits, $23,700. I ran the numbers on my desk calculator. Total, $58,200, an exact match. Vivian had not just taken money. She had specifically extracted the exact amount I had personally invested in the house. It was a calculated statement. She was not just stealing from my father. She was erasing me. But how did she justify the transfer? My father, for all his passivity, would notice a sum that large vanishing. I realized I was only looking at my own files. I needed to see the paperwork for the recent kitchen renovation, the one Vivian had been bragging about since summer. That evening, I stopped by my father's coffee shop, the Daily Duke. During the late afternoon lull, he was wiping down the espresso machine, the scent of dark roast and steamed milk hanging in the air. "Isabel," he smiled, his eyes crinkling, though he looked tired. "Come for a free latte?" "Just a visit, Dad. Hey, I was just thinking. Vivian's new kitchen must have cost a fortune. I'd love to see the plans, maybe see which contractors she used, in case I need them for a Northline project." He waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, Vivian handled all of that. You know how she is. Specific about every little knob and tile. She said it was her masterpiece. The files should be in the office." He led me to the cramped back room, past 100-pound bags of coffee beans, and pulled a thick accordion folder from a filing cabinet. "Here it is. House renovation, kitchen. Take a look. Just don't mention it to Vivian. She likes to present the final product, you know?" "I know, Dad." I took the folder back to my office at Northline, the silence of the empty building a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in my mind. I spread the contents across my drafting table. It was not the clean, itemized, professional invoices I was used to. It was a mess of carbon copies, blurry receipts from thermal paper, and handwritten notes. The descriptions were hopelessly vague. Design consultation, cabinetry materials, labor and installation. There were no company letterheads I recognized, no contractor license numbers. And then I saw the signatures. On the few delivery confirmation slips, the signature was not my father's. His signature is a sharp, distinct Thomas Duke. This was a loopy, careless Duke, sometimes just a scribble. It looked unnervingly like Jade's handwriting. I pulled out my calculator again. I added up every vague receipt, every blurry invoice. The final sum came to $58,200. She had faked an entire renovation's worth of paperwork to match the exact amount I had put in, creating a fraudulent paper trail to justify the transfer to her friend Portia's shell company. Back in the quiet of my office, surrounded by blueprints for structures built on logic and integrity, I did what I do best. I organized the data. I opened a new, encrypted spreadsheet on my secure server. Column A, my original, legitimate payments to certified contractors. Boiler, roof, electrical. Column B, the dates of those payments. Column C, the scanned images of the new, fraudulent invoices from Vivian's folder. Column D, the bank statement showing the $58,200 transfer from my father's joint account to Ashford Design Logistics. Column E, the business registration records for the shell company, listing Portia Vale as the registered agent. It was no longer a suspicion. It was a flowchart of criminal fraud. It was clear, undeniable, and clean. I needed one more piece of confirmation. I looked up the number for Sal Martinez, the master electrician whose team I had personally hired for the rewiring project 2 years ago. Sal was a straight shooter. "Martinez Electrical," he answered gruffly. "Sal, this is Isabel Duke from Northline Structures." "Hey, Isabel, good to hear from you. Need another inspection on that new site?" "Something like that. Sal, I heard my father's house, over on Willow, got another big kitchen job recently. Did your team work on that one too?" There was a half-second pause. Yeah, he said, his voice tightening. "We did. It was something. Were you coordinating with my father, Thomas, on that job?" Sal let out a short, dry laugh. "Thomas? I think I saw him once, when he brought us coffee. No. We answered to the new Mrs. Duke, Vivian. She was the supervisor, on site every single day, changing specs, demanding different fixtures, asking us to move outlets we had just installed. Honestly, it was a nightmare. Half the work she wanted was purely cosmetic, wouldn't even pass a commercial code. But she was the one signing off, directing the work? 100%, he confirmed. Her and the younger one, Jade. They were the bosses, not Thomas. Your dad just paid the bills, I guess. I thanked him and hung up. My father was not a participant. He was the victim. My spreadsheet was evidence, but it was not a legal weapon. This was beyond a family argument. I needed a lawyer. Evan Rourke was not a Fairview Springs local. He worked out of a sharp, modern office in the city, specializing in complex civil litigation and asset disputes. He was exactly my age, wore minimalist suits, and had a reputation for cutting through procedural nonsense. Most importantly, he had zero patience for the town's delicate social games. I rented a conference room and laid out my findings on the monitor, the spreadsheet connecting every dot. He clicked through the linked files, his expression unreadable. He read the business registration, the bank transfer, and the 2 sets of invoices. You're right. This is clean, he said finally, leaning back. The shell company, the matching funds, the fraudulent justification, it's textbook fraud. What about the money I put in? I asked. The $58,000? That's the hard part, Isabel, Evan said, tapping his stylus on the glass table. You have no contract, no loan agreement with your father. You sent payments directly to vendors on his behalf. Legally, that's a gift. We can't claw back a gift. So she just gets away with stealing it? Not necessarily. We don't go after your money. We go after her actions. We build a case for financial elder abuse, fraud, and undue influence. We argue that she coerced your father, who is the actual victim here, into authorizing that transfer based on fraudulent documents. It's a strong case, but it's messy. A family dispute. A judge will probably just order mediation. Try to split the difference. It's not a kill shot. He looked at me, his eyes analytical. What we really need is leverage. Something that breaks the he said, she said barrier. Something definitive. He paused, organizing his thoughts. Does your father's side of the family have any, say, complex trusts? Old money? My grandmother, I said immediately. Marjorie Duke. She passed away 5 years ago, just before my father married Vivian. Old money families love complex trusts, Evan mused, and sometimes they include behavioral clauses, morality clauses. They're archaic, but they can be ironclad if written correctly. They usually stipulate that a beneficiary can be disinherited or lose control for actions that bring public shame on the family. Criminal charges, public drunkenness, documented infidelity, or sometimes. He looked at me directly, his voice dropping slightly. Publicly documented violence. Public violence. The words hung in the sterile air of the conference room. I felt a sudden, cold jolt, a memory surfacing with perfect clarity. My grandmother Marjorie. She was nothing like my father. She was steel, quartz, and shrewd observation. She had seen right through Vivian from the moment they met, a fact she made politely but chillingly clear at the engagement party. I remembered standing with her at the Fairview Savings and Trust, years ago, when I was co-signing paperwork for my first Northline business loan. My grandmother had been visiting her own safe deposit box. She tapped the flat, stainless steel drawer with a long fingernail. This, Isabel, she had said, her voice as dry as paper, is where the truth is kept. Most of my assets are in the Marjorie Family Trust, which your father will oversee. But this box, this one only opens under the right conditions. It's set for a specific date. I had smiled, thinking it was a figure of speech. What date? Your birthday? Thanksgiving, she'd said, her eyes not smiling at all. The one day a year families are forced to tell the truth or expose their most spectacular lies. I left Evan's office, my heart pounding a new rhythm. I drove straight to the downtown branch of the bank. I was still a named party on the trust, a secondary beneficiary, though my father was the primary trustee. Mr. Harris, the branch manager, recognized me. Ms. Duke, good to see you. How is Northline? Growing? Thank you. Mr. Harris, I need to check the access parameters for the Marjorie Family Trust safe deposit boxes, specifically, any private or contingent boxes. He looked surprised but typed my information into his system. He frowned. Well, that's unusual. Yes, the primary trust box is, of course, under the control of the trustee, your father. But there is a second, private box. It is sealed. The access list is very specific. He turned the monitor so I could read it. Access. Isabel Duke. Condition. Contingent. Viewing authorized on the day immediately following the Thanksgiving federal holiday. Note. Box cannot be opened before this date. If the access window is missed, the box reseals for 1 calendar year. The day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday. My grandmother had not just left a will. She had set a trap. She had anticipated a moment just like this. The Thanksgiving dinner was the stage. The day after was the reckoning. I walked out of the bank into the cold November air, my mind racing. The pieces were clicking into place. The dinner, the high-profile guests, Vivian's need to perform. I got back to my car. My phone buzzed. A new email. Same anonymous sender. Don't sit near the window. I looked around the street, suddenly paranoid. Shoppers hurried by, heads down. Watch the kitchen and the house papers. That was the fraud. Don't sit near the window. What was this? A physical warning? I thought about the layout of my father's dining room. The long table. The large, antique bay window at the far end. It was an old house. The glass in that window was thick, wavy. It acted like a dark mirror, especially at night. From the head of the table, where Vivian would sit, the window reflected the entire room, particularly the main doorway and the entrance to the kitchen. The sender was not just warning me. They were giving me a strategy. They were telling me where the best view of the confrontation would be. This was no longer just a financial dispute. It was a planned confrontation, and someone else was watching. I drove back to my office. I was an engineer. I do not guess. I calculate. I mitigate risk. I downloaded an application to my phone, one that provided a clear automated vocal disclaimer for call recording. It was perfectly legal in my state, but the disclaimer was professional. I enabled it. All recordings were set to save instantly to an encrypted cloud drive, one Evan Rourke had access to. My first call was to my father. This call may be recorded for quality assurance, the robotic voice stated clearly. Isabel, my father answered, confused. Hi, Dad. Just testing a new system for Northline. Just wanted to confirm the time for Thursday. Oh, wonderful. Vivian is so excited. 7 o'clock sharp. Don't be late. I might be a few minutes behind. Coming from the office. Is Jade helping out with the prep? Oh, she's organizing everything. Vivian is relying on her heavily for the decor. The recording was crystal clear. It saved. I then called the catering company Vivian was using, pretending to check on peanut allergies. I recorded that, too. I called the florist. I was building a digital footprint of the event, time-stamping every interaction. If Vivian and Jade were planning to lie, to spin a narrative, I would have a baseline of verifiable, objective truth. I was now calculating the precise failure point of my stepmother's carefully constructed world. I arrived at 7:05 p.m. The house I grew up in was almost unrecognizable. Vivian had re-landscaped the front walk with severe, colorless shrubbery and dramatic uplighting. It looked less like a home and more like the entrance to a private wealth management firm, a place where money went to be quietly laundered. As I pressed the doorbell, I looked directly into the lens of the high-definition Ring camera. The small blue light was active. I smiled faintly, a small, tight acknowledgement for the cloud server that was already recording. To the right of the door, just as I had hoped, was a small, tasteful plastic sign on the brick. These premises are protected by audio and video surveillance. I had already texted Evan Rourke a photo of the sign earlier in the week when I drove by. His reply was immediate. That's the ballgame. The sign is a public declaration. They have waived all expectation of privacy. Any footage captured is admissible as evidence of a tort, like slander or, should it happen, assault. The mic on that thing is hot. Behave. Vivian opened the door. She was a vision in an oyster-colored silk pantsuit. Her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her smile was wide, bright, and utterly false. "Isabel, darling, you made it," she gushed, kissing the air half an inch from my cheek. I could smell her perfume. It was sharp and expensive. "We were so worried your little project would keep you." "Hello, Vivian," I said, stepping inside. The house was warm, bordering on hot, and buzzing with the low murmur of expensive conversations. Guests I recognized, Fairview Springs' real estate and finance elite, clinked glasses in the living room. You absolutely must, see the kitchen," she announced, her hand gripping my elbow in a gesture that was meant to look affectionate, but felt like an escort. "It's finally done." She presented it like a game show host revealing the grand prize. The kitchen I had paid to rewire, the one with the safe, functional boiler I had installed, was gone. In its place was an expanse of aggressive, sterile white marble counters with dramatic gray veining, white lacquer cabinets, stainless steel appliances that looked surgical. It was a kitchen designed for photo spreads, not for cooking. "Jade coordinated the entire installation," Vivian beamed, pulling her daughter into the spotlight. "She has such an eye for modern elegance, don't you think?" Jade, leaning against a monolithic marble island and sipping champagne, smirked at me. She was a paler, younger version of her mother, dressed in a black dress that looked calculatedly simple. "It's just surfaces, Mother. What matters is the structure beneath." She looked directly at me. "Isn't that right, Isabel? We're just waiting on you to sign that inheritance waiver, and then all this unpleasantness can be settled. Then we can all be family." The inheritance waiver was a new low, even for them. It was a document Vivian's lawyer had drafted a month ago, a vague, sweeping request for me to waive all future claims on my father's estate in exchange for what, exactly? Familial harmony. It was a ridiculous, unenforceable document, but it was their opening salvo. I ignored her. My gaze was doing a systematic sweep of the room. I was scanning for data points. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "Oh, he's in his workshop," Vivian said, waving a dismissive hand, her bracelets jangling. "He's fussing over the dessert. You know him." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "He's bringing out his special single-origin coffee later. He's so much happier when he has a task, don't you think? It keeps him centered." I translated. "He is hiding from the conflict I created, and I am encouraging it." My scan continued. The Ring camera covered the entryway and the living room. The new kitchen, as I expected, had a Google Nest Hub on the counter, positioned by the espresso machine. Its screen was dark, but its microphone was active. In the dining room, on the sideboard, sat a black Sonos smart speaker. And then I saw the main event. I walked into the dining room, making a show of admiring the setup. It's a beautiful renovation. "Vivian, the finish on these new cabinets is incredible." I reached out and touched the dark, high-gloss surface of a massive new china cabinet that had been built into the wall, replacing the old, warm oak piece my mother had loved. Such a deep polish. You can see the whole room. I watched Vivian's reflection as I said it. She glanced at the cabinet, then at the Nest Hub in the kitchen, and a flicker of annoyance crossed her face. Probably at me touching the lacquer. It did not matter. I had confirmed the triangulation. The anonymous email, "Don't sit near the window," was correct, but I had initially misunderstood the reason. The bay window itself was not the surveillance point. The new, high-gloss china cabinet was positioned directly opposite the dining table. Its dark, polished doors acted as a perfect, high-contrast mirror. From the kitchen, the Nest Hub's camera had a clear, unobstructed view of those cabinet doors. And those doors, in turn, reflected the entire head of the table, where Vivian and my father would sit. It was an accidental, perfect surveillance setup. Vivian, in her quest for a modern elegance finish, had inadvertently created the primary piece of evidence against herself. We sat down to dinner. The table was suffocatingly formal. I was seated between a local bank manager, Ron Fitzsimmons, and his silent, anxious wife. Vivian, at the head of the table, raised her glass. Her diamonds flashed under the new, cold LED chandelier. "To a perfect evening," she said, her voice resonant, "surrounded by our dearest friends, and to family, who always come home." Her eyes found mine. The bank manager turned to me, dutifully making conversation. "So, Isabel, Vivian tells me you have a small construction company?" Before I could answer, Vivian leaned forward, projecting her voice for the whole table. "Oh, it's a fascinating little project. Isabel builds roads. Very functional," she smiled, the implication clear. "Not like us. Not elegant. Not valuable. We're so proud she has a hobby that pays for itself. My company's payroll last month was over $85,000. My last contract bid was for $2.2 million. We build civil infrastructure," I said evenly, my voice cutting through her performance. "Bridges, storm shelters, municipal water systems, things that last." "How admirable," said Portia Vale, the real estate broker. She was seated at my father's right. She was the registered agent of the shell company. She was here to advance the plot. "But the real money, darling, is in residential, especially in Fairview Springs." She turned to my father, who had just emerged carrying a tray of pies, his refuge. "Thomas, we were just discussing, with this kitchen, your house value has skyrocketed. You're sitting on a gold mine. I was talking to my contacts on the Planning Commission, and they're approving 3 new subdivisions just south of here. Your equity is peaking. We should really talk after the holiday. Free up that capital. Liquidate." My father just blinked, holding the pies. A man trapped in his own home. "Oh, well, I wouldn't know. Portia, Vivian handles the house finances." "Of course she does," Portia smiled. "She's brilliant." This was the script. This dinner, these guests, they were the independent voices she had assembled to pressure my father into selling the house. The wine was flowing. It was a heavy, dark French label I recognized, one that retailed for at least $200 a bottle. The empty bottles were piling up on the sideboard. A waiter, Vivian had hired catering, quietly placed the check and a portable card machine next to my father. My father looked at the bill, his brow furrowing. "Vivian," he said weakly, "this is quite a lot for the wine." "It's an investment, Thomas," Portia cut in smoothly, not missing a beat. "You can't impress the right people with cheap substitutes. It's the cost of doing business." Vivian just smiled at Portia, then looked at my father. A look of mild disappointment. It was all it took. He immediately fumbled for his wallet. He pulled out his business debit card, the one linked to the Daily Duke, not his personal checking. As he held it out, I leaned forward, my phone in my lap, screen active. "Dad, wait," I said. He paused, the card hovering. "Are you sure you want to use the shop account for that? Isn't that for the beans and the payroll?" Vivian's head snapped toward me. Her eyes were chips of ice. "Isabel, do not question your father's finances at the table. It's incredibly rude." "I'm just asking a question." I kept my voice light. As I leaned back, I raised my phone slightly, shielded by the tablecloth and the angle of the table. Click, click, too clear, high-resolution photos, the itemized bill, showing $1,640 for wine, and the bank card, clearly showing the name, the Daily Duke. This was no longer just fraud. This was commingling funds. This was evidence she was encouraging him to pierce the corporate veil of his small business, exposing his one remaining personal asset to her spending. I saved the photos to the cloud drive. I excused myself from the table. In the upstairs bathroom, the only room she had not yet renovated, I texted the photos of the bill to Evan's secure drive. I added a new text. Confirmed camera in kitchen with clear view of dining room. Reflections on new cabinets capture the head of the table. Also confirmed smart speakers. Posted sign at entry. We are green lit. She is commingling his business funds. Just photographed wine bill charged to the Daily Duke debit card. Evan replied 30 seconds later. Admissible for tort claims. The commingling is even better. Stay calm. Let her talk. Do not engage. You are a witness, not a participant. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and returned to the table. Dessert was being served. The atmosphere had soured. The performance was flagging. Vivian caught my eye as I sat down. Her smile was gone, replaced by a tight, warning look, as a guest moved by. Vivian walked over to my chair, leaned down, and her voice was a low hiss, meant only for me, but the tension was visible to everyone. I don't know what you think you are doing, Isabel, but this is my night. Do not ruin this for me. Her control was slipping. Jade, who had clearly had too much of the $1,600 wine, saw her mother's aggression and took it as a green light. "Oh, leave her alone, Mother," she said, her voice loud and slurring slightly. "She's just upset, probably because her last relationship lasted less time than a concrete curing. It's hard to find a date when you smell like gravel." The bank manager froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. My father looked down at his plate, suddenly fascinated by his coffee cup. Or maybe it's just that no one wants to compete with a bridge. Jade pressed on, relishing the silence. "God, Isabel, when was the last time you even talked to someone who wasn't on your payroll? That architect guy, what was his name? The one who left after 6 weeks? Did you try to bill him for his time?" The table was completely still. This was not a barb. It was a shiv. It was personal, cruel, and designed to make me scream, or cry, or throw a drink. It was exactly the kind of escalation Vivian loved, letting Jade do the dirty work so she could swoop in as the peacemaker. I saw the expectation in Vivian's eyes, the hunger for the explosion. I did nothing. I simply picked up my fork and took a small, precise bite of the pie my father had set in front of me. I let her vulgarity hang in the air, unclaimed. I did not look at her, or at Jade. I looked at the bank manager, Ron Fitzsimmons. "This pie is excellent, Dad," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Is this the new Sumatra blend in the crust?" The non-reaction was a weapon Jade did not understand. She flushed, angry that I had not given her the fight she wanted. But Vivian understood. My calm was a threat. My refusal to engage on her terms meant I was operating on my own. I saw her clench her jaw. I watched her reflection in the dark china cabinet. She was losing control of the narrative, and her perfect night was beginning to crack. My father's pie was the last good thing about the evening. After my non-reaction to Jade's attack, an uncomfortable, brittle silence settled over the table, broken only by the nervous clinking of silverware. The guests, the bank manager, Portia Vale, the venture capitalist, looked anywhere but at me or at Jade. They were witnesses to a social breach, and it made them fidgety. My father, desperate to restore order, bustled around serving his coffee. "This is a new blend," he announced, his voice overly cheerful. "From a small co-op in Honduras, it has notes of chocolate and cherry." This was the moment Portia Vale had been waiting for. The performance of dessert and coffee signaled the end of the social part of the evening and the beginning of the business part. She took a sip from the delicate cup my father handed her, her diamonds flashing. "Thomas, this is divine," she said, her voice smooth as oil. "You have such a gift, which is why," she continued, seamlessly transitioning, "we must protect your assets." She reached into a slim, expensive leather portfolio by her chair. "Vivian and I were discussing it, with the market this high, and with the success of your magnificent renovation." She smiled at Vivian. "Your equity is at its peak. It's time to leverage it, but you need to be structured for it." She placed a document in front of my father, next to his coffee cup. It was thick, bound in a professional blue cover. Jade actually prepared the initial draft for us. Bless her heart. She's so efficient. It's just a simple proposal for the second phase of renovations, to make the house truly market-ready, just a formality, really, to allow Vivian and me to act on your behalf with the planners and the banks. It saves you the headache. My father, who despised paperwork and trusted people he believed were smarter than him, picked it up. He squinted at the cover. A second renovation? Portia. I don't know. May I? I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Portia's smile tightened by a single, fractional millimeter. Isabel, darling, I don't want to bore you. This is just dry legal text. I'm a general contractor, Portia, I said, holding out my hand. My company handles million-dollar municipal contracts. I read fine print for a living. I'm sure I can keep up. My father, visibly relieved to have an out, immediately pushed the document toward me. Yes, Isabel, you look at it. You understand this leverage stuff. I pulled the document toward me. The room was silent. I could feel Vivian's stare like a physical weight. I turned to the first page. It was not a renovation proposal. It was a durable power of attorney, cleverly disguised. I read the lines, my mind highlighting the trap clauses as clearly as if I were using a yellow marker. Section 3A, hereby grants full authority to Ashford Design Logistics, LLC, as acting consulting partner, to make all decisions regarding the restructuring, financing, and potential sale of the property. Section 4C. All proceeds from the sale of said property shall first be directed to the consulting partner to satisfy outstanding fees and invoices, at a rate to be determined solely by said partner. Section 5.B. Thomas Duke agrees to waive all rights to contest or audit the fees set by the consulting partner. Section 6A. The consulting partner and its agents, Portia Vale, Vivian Ashford Duke, are fully indemnified and held harmless from any and all liability, financial or otherwise, arising from this agreement. It was a complete surrender. It gave Vivian and Portia, through their shell company, the right to sell the house, pay themselves an undefined consulting fee of any amount they chose, and left my father with nothing. And he would have no legal recourse to fight it. This was the house papers' warning from the email. This was the endgame. They were not just draining his accounts. They were planning to steal the house itself. I looked up from the pages, my blood running ice cold. I looked at Portia, then at Vivian. This isn't a renovation plan, I said, my voice flat. This is a full asset transfer disguised as a power of attorney, and the consulting partner you've given sole discretion to, Ashford Design Logistics, that's your shell company, Portia. Portia Vale actually gasped, a theatrical gesture of offense. How dare you? That is a legitimate advisory firm. With no employees, no business history, and an address that traces back to a post office box, I said. I've seen it. Vivian finally spoke. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping loudly on the hardwood floor. Isabel, that is enough. Her voice was no longer the charming hostess. It was a command. You are embarrassing yourself, and you are embarrassing this family. You've been playing with your little concrete mixers and your gravel for so long. You think you understand how the real world works. She gestured at the document. This is high finance. This is how people secure their futures. Something you clearly know nothing about, or you would not be sitting here alone at 32, smelling like rebar. The personal attacks were just cover fire. This document is predatory, I said, pushing it back toward the center of the table. Dad, you cannot sign this. She's just jealous, Jade piped up, her voice shrill. She can't stand that you're being taken care of by someone who actually knows how to manage wealth. Manage wealth? I repeated. Or steal it. Like the $58,200 you funneled to Portia's company 3 weeks ago under the guise of a kitchen renovation that never happened? The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. The bank manager, Ron Fitzsimmons, went pale. He had, I knew, just approved a new line of credit for Vivian based on the house's upgraded equity. Vivian's eyes narrowed into slits. You have been snooping, like a common thief. I've been auditing, I corrected her. You left a paper trail a mile wide. It was then that the bank manager's anxious wife, who had not said more than 2 words all night, nervously lifted her smartphone. The room was so tense, so perfectly staged. The angry stepmother, the defiant daughter, the cowering father. It was pure drama. She thought she was being subtle, but in the dim light of the dining room, the flash was explosive. Flash. The sudden light illuminated all our faces, freezing us. Vivian flinched back, furious at the light. Jade shielded her eyes. My father looked like a terrified animal. I did not move. I did not blink. As the flash went off, I instinctively angled my left wrist toward the woman. A subtle, fractional turn. The light glinted off the dark, inactive face of my smart watch. It was a habit from my work sites. If there is a sudden event, you orient yourself. But I was also acutely aware of what the watch was. It was a data logger. It was active. It had an accelerometer, a gyroscope. It was designed to detect high-impact events, like a fall on a construction site. Its sensors were waiting. The metadata of the photo would log the time. My watch was logging the time. I was creating a timeline. "My God," my father whispered, his face ashen. He finally understood that this was not a discussion. It was an execution. "Vivian, Isabel, please, please, not now. We have guests. We are a family. Don't make a scene." This was his refrain, his prayer. Don't make a scene, hide the rot, pretend the foundation is sound. I looked at him, and for the first time, my anger softened into a cold, hard pity. "I agree, Dad. We are a family." I tapped the document. "So why are we hiding liability waivers in the fine print? Why are we writing contracts to steal from each other?" "She's doing it again!" Jade shrieked, suddenly standing up so fast her chair almost toppled. "You are obsessed with money, Isabel. That is all you care about. You're just fighting over the inheritance. You can't stand that you're not the favorite. You've hated us since the day we moved in." In her rage, she threw her arm out for emphasis, her hand connecting with her half-full glass of red wine. It arced through the air, a perfect dark red spray. It landed on the cream-colored linen tablecloth, splashing across the centerpiece. The dark liquid soaked in instantly, spreading like a pool of blood. The room held its breath. It was a terrible, beautiful omen. While everyone stared at the stain, while Jade stood frozen, hands still in the air, I made my final move. I calmly reached into my pocket. I took out my phone. I unlocked it. I opened the encrypted spreadsheet I had prepared at my office. I placed the phone, screen up, on the white table, just beside the creeping edge of the wine stain. I did not say a word. I just let the light from the screen illuminate the space between us. The guests closest to me, Ron Fitzsimmons and his wife, leaned in, their eyes widening. The bright white columns were unmistakable, even from a distance. Column A, payment to roofer, payment to electrician, payment to plumber. Column B, my personal bank account. Column C, fraudulent invoice, design consultation, fraudulent invoice, cabinetry. Column D, transfer from Thomas Duke to Ashford, design logistics. At the bottom, in bold, the two matching totals, $58,200. The evidence was on the table. The fraud was no longer an accusation. It was a receipt. Portia Vale, the real estate broker, looked at the phone, then at Vivian, her face a mask of sudden, cold calculation. She was a witness. The bank manager was a witness. They were all witnesses. Vivian stared at the glowing screen. Her curated performance, her social climbing, her intricate web of polite theft, all of it was reduced to a few lines on a spreadsheet. I had brought my world of cold, hard data into her world of illusions, and her world was disintegrating. She looked at my father, who was staring at the phone, his mouth open. She looked at Portia, who was already subtly distancing herself, easing her chair back. She looked at the other guests, who were now staring at her with a new, horrifying comprehension. She had lost the room. She had lost the money. She had lost her reputation. She had nothing left to play. So she turned to me. She began to walk. She did not rush. She moved from the head of the table, around the corner, her silk pantsuit whispering. The guests shrank back as she passed. She stopped directly beside my chair, so close I could feel the heat radiating from her. She stood over me, blocking the light from the chandelier. Her face was no longer the manicured, smiling mask of the Fairview Spring socialite. It was something primal, distorted by pure, undiluted rage. Her voice, when she spoke, was not a hiss. It was a low, guttural snarl, heavy with threat, and loud enough for everyone in the silent room to hear. "You think you are so clever," she breathed. Her eyes locked on mine. "You arrogant little bitch. You will give me that phone. Right, now." I did not move. I did not flinch. I did not hand her the phone. I simply held her gaze. The spreadsheet on the screen between us glowed, a testament to her fraud, a beacon in the dim, ruined dining room. "No," I said. It was a single word, spoken quietly, but in the silence of that room, it was as loud as a gunshot. For a second, Vivian just stared, her face a grotesque mask of disbelief. She was processing the defiance, the exposure, the total loss of control in front of her high-powered audience, the rage, pure and primitive, finally won. It was incredibly fast, a blur of oyster-colored silk and flashing diamonds. Her hand, the one with the heavy cocktail ring, came up and across her body. The sound was not a movie sound. It was not a dramatic smack. It was a sharp, wet, percussive crack. It was the sound of bone and flesh colliding at high velocity. The force of it snapped my head to the side, knocking my hair across my face. A bright, white-hot light exploded behind my left eye, and my ear erupted in a high-pitched, piercing ring. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. I heard every tiny detail. The sharp, shocked intake of breath from Ron Fitzsimmons. The clink of a fork as it was dropped onto a china plate by Mrs. Davies. The sound of my father. A low, strangled groan, as if he, too, had been struck. I could smell Vivian's perfume, heavy and sharp, mixed with the coppery tang of blood in my mouth where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. I did not raise my hand to my face. I did not cry out. I sat perfectly still. My head still turned to the side, letting the silence stretch, letting every person in that room bake in the horror of the moment. And then, on my left wrist, under the table, I felt it. A sharp, precise, haptic vibration. Bzzzt, bzzzt, bzzzt. I glanced down. Just a fractional movement. The dark, inactive face of my smart watch had illuminated. A small white icon of a falling person appeared on the screen. A message, typed in clean, sans serif font, popped up over it. "A hard fall or impact has been detected. Are you okay?" It was logging the event. It was logging the G-force of the impact, a force far greater than a simple stumble. It was logging the time, 7:54 p.m. It was logging the precise GPS location of my father's house. The metadata, the objective, verifiable, third-party data, was already being saved to the encrypted cloud. I looked up again, past Vivian's heaving chest. Her hand was still slightly raised, tingling. Her face was frozen in a mask of manic, triumphant rage. My gaze moved past her, toward the kitchen. The little blue light on the Google Nest Hub on the counter was silently active. Its microphone was live. I looked at the dark, polished surface of the new china cabinet across from me. Our reflections were perfectly framed. Vivian, standing over me, hand raised, me, seated. My head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. The camera in the kitchen was capturing the reflection. The Sonos speaker on the sideboard was capturing the audio, the crack of the impact, my quiet "no," and the heavy, damning silence that followed. I slowly turned my head back to face her. The throbbing in my cheek was deep and hot. I looked directly into her eyes. I did not raise my voice. I spoke clearly, into the microphone-filled air. "Now," I said, my voice perfectly level. "We have a timeline. The words broke the spell. "Oh my God," my father whispered. He stumbled back, his hand over his mouth. "Vivian, Vivian, you hit her. My God. Isabel, in front of... Oh, God." He looked at his guests, his face collapsing in a rictus of shame and terror. Vivian, seeing his reaction, tried to reclaim the narrative. Her chest was still heaving, but the calculating mask began to slide back into place. "She deserved it," she snapped, though her voice was a fraction too high. "She was insulting our guests. She was being hysterical. That is called discipline, Thomas, something you clearly never taught her." "Discipline?" Ron Fitzsimmons, the bank manager, repeated. His voice was shaky. He looked pale. He was no longer a potential business partner. He was a witness to assault. "She provoked her," the bank manager's wife, Mrs. Fitzsimmons, suddenly whispered. She was the one who had taken the flash photograph. She was now implicated, a witness in a room where a crime had just been committed, and her instinct was to blame the victim. "You all saw it. She was being difficult. She came in here looking for a fight." Portia Vale, however, said nothing. Her face was as white as the marble countertop. Her eyes were not on me, or even on Vivian. They were darting between the bank manager and the other guests. She was a real estate broker. She was the owner of the shell company. She was calculating. She was seeing her license, her reputation, and her connection to Ashford Design Logistics, all circling a very dark, very deep drain. Another guest, a man named Mr. Albright, from a local venture capital fund, abruptly stood up. "Vivian, I really must apologize. We should be going. It's late." He was attempting to exit the scene, to remove himself from the witness list. "No one is leaving," I said. My voice was not loud, but it had the flat, hard authority of a foreman on a work site. Every single person, including Mr. Albright, froze. I kept my left hand, the one with the watch, steady on my lap. With my right hand, I picked up my phone from the table. The spreadsheet was still glowing. I swiped out of it. I opened the camera. I reversed the lens to selfie mode. I angled my face toward the cold, bright light of the chandelier. The mark was already blooming, a perfect, ugly red handprint across my left cheek, the imprint of her rings already visible as small, white welts near my cheekbone. I held the phone steady. Click. The photo was clear, perfectly lit, and undeniable. I saved it. It uploaded instantly, time-stamped, to the same cloud drive Evan Rourke was monitoring. I placed the phone back on the table. Screen up. "Dad," I said, my voice still perfectly calm. "Could you please get me a bag of ice from the new freezer? My face is swelling." This simple domestic request shattered my father's paralysis. It was a task. He nodded dumbly. "Ice. Yes. Of course. Ice." He nearly ran to the kitchen, grateful to escape. While he was gone, I looked around the table. I made eye contact with every single guest, and I named them. Ron Fitzsimmons, Mrs. Fitzsimmons, Portia Vale, Mr. Albright, Mrs. Davies, you are all witnesses. I want to be perfectly clear about what you just saw, so there is no confusion for your statements later. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping back. I was now eye level with Vivian. The top of her head barely reached my chin. "You just witnessed Vivian Ashford Duke," I said, my voice resonating in the quiet room. "My stepmother physically assault me in my father's home. You witnessed this assault occur immediately after I presented documented evidence of financial fraud." I pointed to the phone. "This behavior, in front of independent, third-party witnesses, constitutes domestic violence and battery." My father returned, holding a rattling bag of frozen peas, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold it. I took it from him gently. "Thank you, Dad." I pressed the freezing bag to my cheek. The cold was a sharp, grounding relief, focusing my thoughts. Vivian stared at me, her eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. She had moved from rage to panic. She had not been disciplining me. She had just committed a crime, and I had just read the charges out loud to a room full of the most influential people in town. Jade was pale, shrunk back against the wall, her own phone in her hand. She was probably texting, trying to figure out an angle, but she looked terrified. Vivian tried one last time to bluff. She drew herself up, smoothing the front of her silk pantsuit, attempting to reclaim her dignity. "Sue me." "Then," she spat, her voice dripping with a venom that could not hide the tremor beneath it. "Go ahead, get your little project lawyer. It will be your word against mine, my friends." She gestured wildly at the table. "They will tell the truth, that you are an unstable, jealous girl who came here and attacked me in my own home. You threw that wine. You made a scene." I almost smiled. It was a weak, pathetic, sloppy attempt. "Jade threw the wine," I said, not even looking at her. I looked back at Vivian, the condensation from the peas dripping onto my hand. "I'm not going to sue you, Vivian," I said, my voice quiet. "That won't be necessary. You're right. That's messy, and I don't need your friend's testimony." I picked up my coat from the chair where I had left it. I placed my phone in my pocket. "You just activated the morality clause," I said. Vivian frowned, her brows knitting in genuine, confused panic. "What? What are you talking about? What clause?" "I'll see you tomorrow." "Dad," I said, walking toward the front door. "I'll be at Fairview Savings and Trust at 9 a.m. You should probably be there too." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. I looked back at the room of horrified faces, at the ruined dinner, at the spreading wine stain, at the woman who had just destroyed her entire life with a single, panicked motion. "You forgot about my grandmother," I said. "You forgot about the will. You forgot about the second key." I opened the door and walked out into the cold November night, the sound of the Ring camera's audio feed clicking off as I closed the door firmly behind me. The morning of Black Friday was cold and clear. Downtown Fairview Springs was quiet. The shopping frenzy was concentrated in the strip malls out by the highway. A different kind of desperation. I felt a cold, sharp focus. The throbbing in my cheek had subsided to a dull purple ache, a physical reminder of the previous night's calculations. I met Evan Rourke on the granite steps of Fairview Savings and Trust at 8:50 a.m. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit and holding a slim leather briefcase. He looked less like a lawyer and more like an undertaker. "Ms. Duke," he said, his eyes flicking to the bruise on my cheek. He did not comment on it. "I reviewed the data you uploaded last night. The impact log from your watch is time-stamped at 7:54 p.m. The audio file from the Sonos captured the word "no" at 7:54 and 6 seconds, followed by the sound of the impact at 7:54 and 7 seconds. The photo of your injury was time-stamped at 7:57. You have established an unbreakable chain of evidence." "Let's see what my grandmother added to it," I said. We walked inside. Mr. Harris, the bank manager, was waiting for us, his expression nervous. He had clearly heard I was coming. He ushered us into the vault without a word, the massive circular steel door hissing open. "The Marjorie Family Trust, contingent box," I said. He nodded, retrieved a long, thin stainless steel drawer, and handed it to me. We took it to a private viewing room, a small, soundproofed cubicle with a single table. Evan set down his briefcase. I unlocked the box with my own key, the one my grandmother had given me 15 years ago. "For a rainy day," she had said. It was pouring. The box was not full. It contained only 2 items. The first was a thick vellum envelope, sealed with her personal wax signet, a stylized D. The second was a single, folded sheet of lined ledger paper. I opened the vellum envelope first. Evan leaned in. It was, as he had predicted, a formal addendum to the Marjorie Family Trust. His eyes scanned the legal text, faster than I could read it. "Here it is," he murmured, tapping a paragraph halfway down the page. "Section 4, the Morality Addendum." He read it aloud, his voice flat and clinical. "Should any subsequent spouse of my son, Thomas Duke, who is not the mother of his issue, commit an act of public violence, defined as battery or assault, against a lineal descendant of mine. He looked up at me. That's you. He continued. In the presence of one or more non-family, third-party witnesses, all rights of that spouse as a beneficiary of this trust, including all rights of survivorship, habitation, or stipend, shall be immediately and irrevocably forfeit. My breath caught. Habitation? The house? The house, Evan confirmed. It gets better. Upon said forfeiture, temporary administrative control of the trust, including all real assets, shall pass to the aforementioned lineal descendant, Isabel Duke, until a formal hearing can be convened to make the transfer permanent. This clause is self-executing upon verification of the act. Self-executing, I repeated. The slap was not just an assault, it was a signature. Vivian had signed her own eviction notice. Then I unfolded the second piece of paper. It was the lined ledger sheet, covered in my grandmother's sharp, precise, back-slanted handwriting. It was not a letter, it was a list. May 10th, 2018. Roof repair. Ice storm. Paid by Isabel Duke. $22,000. September 1st, 2018. Electrical rewiring. Full house. Paid by Isabel Duke. $23,700. January 4th, 2019. Boiler replacement. High efficiency. Paid by Isabel Duke. $12,500. Below the list, she had drawn a single, dark line. Total investment, $58,200. To be considered a secured debt against the estate in the event of any dispute or challenge to the trust. This was a loan, not a gift. Marjorie Duke. And at the very bottom, a single, handwritten sentence. P.S. This house has always had enough cameras. Isabel, you just need to have patience. Let the vulgar ones show their hand. I stared at the paper, a cold, profound awe settling over me. She had known. 5 years gone, and she had seen this moment coming. She had anticipated Vivian, the fraud, the desperation, the violence. She had itemized my gifts and recharacterized them as secured debt, giving me the legal standing of a creditor. She had not left me a weapon. She had left me an entire legal strategy. Evan let out a long, slow whistle. This, he said, tapping the ledger sheet, is a masterpiece. Your grandmother was a killer. This document, notarized with the will, makes your $58,200 claim senior to any of Vivian's marital claims, even if she had not forfeited them, but she did. He clicked his briefcase open. We have the act of violence. We have the independent witnesses. We have the digital, time-stamped evidence of the act. We have the financial fraud that precipitated the act. And now, he slid the will and the ledger sheet into a protective sleeve. We have the legal instrument that binds it all together. Vivian Ashford Duke is finished. It is just a question of paperwork. We left the bank. My head was clear. I was no longer just a victim. I was the administrator. We spent the next 2 hours in Evan's office. He was on the phone with his paralegals, dictating motions. I was at a terminal, assembling the evidence package. I am an engineer. I build files. This one was my masterpiece. I created a new, secured folder labeled Duke Trust, Evidence of Forfeiture, 11.23. I uploaded the compressed video file from the Nest Hub, which I had Evan's forensic tech pull from the cloud. The angle was exactly as I predicted. The dark china cabinet reflected the scene perfectly. You could see Vivian's arm swing. You could see my head snap back. I uploaded the separate audio file from the Sonos speaker, which was even clearer. The crack of the slap, Vivian's threat, my response, the gasps of the guests. I uploaded the diagnostic log from my smartwatch, showing the G-force and the timestamp of the impact. I uploaded the high-resolution photo of my bruised face. I created a subfolder, Financials. Inside it went the spreadsheet, the photos of the wine bill and my father's business card, and the business registration for Ashford Design Logistics. Finally, I created a witness document, a simple list. Ron Fitzsimmons, Vice President, Fairview Savings and Trust. Mrs. Ron Fitzsimmons. Portia Vale, owner, Vale Realty, and Ashford Design Logistics. Mr. Charles Albright, partner, Fairview Capital Ventures. Mrs. Ann Davies. By noon, the package was complete. Evan reviewed it. Good. The notice goes out now. He hit send on an email. The recipient was Vivian's lawyer. Attached was a formal notice of forfeiture and a temporary ex parte motion to freeze all marital and trust assets. She can't sell the house, Evan said. She can't access the joint accounts. She can't move the money from the shell company. As of this moment, she is locked out. The temporary administrator, he nodded at me, has assumed control. Now came the second part of the strategy, undermining her support structure. I went to a private office and pulled up my call list. I dialed the first name on my witness list, Ron Fitzsimmons, the banker. I enabled the legal call recording disclaimer. This call may be recorded for quality assurance. He answered on the first ring. Hello? His voice was thin. Mr. Fitzsimmons, this is Isabel Duke. Oh, he said. He sounded ill. Oh, hello. Listen, Isabel, about last night. It was a terrible misunderstanding. I am not calling for your opinion. Mr. Fitzsimmons, I said, my voice cold and flat. I am calling to verify a fact for a legal affidavit. You are the vice president of a federally insured financial institution. I am informing you that I have just filed a legal motion based on evidence of felony financial fraud and misdemeanor battery. You were a witness to both. I am going to ask you one question, yes or no. He was silent. I could hear his shallow breathing. At approximately 7:54 p.m. last night, in the dining room of Thomas Duke, did you or did you not witness Vivian Ashford Duke strike me across the face? There was a long pause. He was weighing his career against his social relationship with Vivian. I had already made that calculation for him. His association with a proven fraud, let alone an assault, would be toxic. Yes, he whispered. Yes, I saw it. Thank you. Mr. Fitzsimmons, you may be subpoenaed to confirm that under oath. Good day. I hung up. I saved the recording. One witness was secured. Portia would be handled by the fraud claim. The others would fall in line. Finally, I had to see my father. I found him at the Daily Duke. The shop was closed, though it was the middle of Black Friday. The open sign was off. I knocked on the glass, and he emerged from the back, his eyes red and swollen. He looked like he had aged 10 years. He let me in. The little bell on the door jangling in the heavy silence. He fumbled with the espresso machine, his hands shaking. Isabel, your face. I am so sorry. I should have said. I'm not here for an apology. Dad, I said, my voice softer now. I sat on one of the stools. I'm here to tell you what happens next. I laid it all out for him. I did not spare him. I told him about the $58,200 fraud. I told him about Portia's shell company. I showed him the power of attorney document he almost signed, the one that would have left him homeless. He sank onto the stool opposite me, his face ashen. She told me it was for taxes, to protect the house. She said you didn't understand finance. She was lying, I said. She was stealing from you, and she was using her friends to help. Then, I pulled out the copy of my grandmother's addendum. I handed it to him. He read the morality clause, his lips moving silently. He read the list of debts, my debts, which she had protected. He put the paper down on the counter, next to a bag of coffee beans, and he put his head in his hands, and for the first time since my mother died, he wept. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of profound, shattering shame. I let her, he whispered. She was so strong, and I just wanted peace. I know, Dad. I let him sit there for a long time, Finally, he looked up, wiping his face. So what? What happens? A divorce? A trial? A divorce, yes, but not a messy one, I said. I stood up. Grandmother's will. The morality clause. It gives us all the leverage. Vivian has forfeited her right to the house. She has forfeited her right to any of the trust's assets. She has no claim on you. He looked at me, a new, fragile light dawning in his eyes. No claim? I'm protected? You're protected, I said. The trust is protected, and I am the temporary administrator, as of this morning. He nodded, absorbing it. He was a man who had lived under a tyrant, and he was suddenly, terrifyingly free. The relief was so palpable it was a physical presence in the room. I'm not going after her for the money, not yet, I told him, walking to the door. That's not the priority. The priority is getting her name off your accounts. The priority is securing the house. The priority is transparency. I looked back at him, this good, weak man who smelled like coffee and just wanted peace. I'm taking legal control of the inheritance, Dad, I said, and I am not letting it go. The legal notice Evan sent on Black Friday detonated in Fairview Springs with the force of a silent, subsurface explosion. The weekend was a flurry of panicked, hushed phone calls. My Thanksgiving was over, but for Vivian and her circle, the real reckoning had just begun. Vivian's first move, predictable as gravity, was to convene a war council. On the Sunday after Thanksgiving, I learned through a text from my father, who was now staying in a guest room at my apartment, a refugee from his own home, that she had summoned the witnesses, Ron Fitzsimmons, Charles Albright, Ann Davies, Portia Vale, notably, was not invited. The meeting was at the house, in the very dining room where the assault had taken place. It was a clarification brunch, a desperate attempt to frame her narrative, to consolidate her witnesses, and to paint me as the unstable, violent interloper. Her story, as my father relayed, was that I had arrived in a state, jealous of the renovation, angry about the inheritance waiver, and that I had, in a fit of rage, thrown the wine glass myself, screaming at her. She claimed my bruised face was from me stumbling into a door in my hysteria. She claimed the spreadsheet was a fabrication, a forgery, a disturbed fantasy I had created to extort them. She was counting on their social allegiance to her, on the town's ingrained politeness, to pressure them into agreeing with this collective lie. She was counting on the fact that no one would want to get involved. She miscalculated. She assumed I was an engineer. She forgot I was also my grandmother's granddaughter. While she was serving her co-conspirators lukewarm mimosas and lies, I was executing the second phase of my strategy. On Monday morning, I invited Ron Fitzsimmons, the banker, to the Daily Duke. My father was there, quietly and nervously wiping down the counter, a symbolic, silent presence. Ron arrived looking like he had not slept in 3 days, his face pale and clammy. "Isabel," he began, his hands fidgeting, "I want you to know, I've spoken with Vivian. This is all a dreadful, dreadful misunderstanding. She's just distraught. We're all sure this can be handled quietly, within the family." "I am not your family, Ron," I said, my voice quiet. I placed my phone on the counter, next to the cash register. "I'm not here to discuss Vivian. I'm here to review your messages." "My messages?" "You left me 3 voicemails between Friday evening and Saturday morning. I just want to confirm you stand by what you said." I pressed play. My phone, as always, announced, "This call is now being recorded." Ron's own voice, tinny and high with panic, filled the quiet coffee shop. "Isabel, this is Ron Fitzsimmons. It's about 10:30 on Friday night. I'm just home. My God, I just want to say, for the record, I am so sorry for what you went through tonight. What Vivian did, hitting you like that. It was unconscionable. It was barbaric. My wife and I, we just want no part of it. Please, let's not let this get to the courts. We'll do anything. Please, just tell us what you need." I stopped the recording. Ron had gone from pale to a faint, sickly green. He was staring at the phone as if it were a snake. "That was you, wasn't it, Ron?" I asked. "Confirming you witnessed the assault. Confirming you called it barbaric and unconscionable. Confirming you were offering anything to stay out of it." I was upset," he stammered. "I wasn't thinking clearly." "On the contrary," I said, "I think that was the clearest you've been. You were a witness to a crime, and you were attempting to disassociate from the perpetrator. I've now logged this recording of your apology. It confirms your testimony. Evan Rourke will be in touch to schedule your formal deposition. You can either be a cooperating witness for us, or Evan can discuss your status as a witness to felony fraud with the State Banking Commission. Your choice." He looked at my father, who was now pointedly polishing a single espresso cup, his back to us. Ron got no help. He deflated. A complete, total collapse of his puffed-up social standing. "Cooperating," he whispered. I'll cooperate." "Good. Send your wife in at 3 p.m. I have her voicemails to review as well." I repeated this process with Ann Davies and Charles Albright. Each of them had left a similar, panicked, apologetic message. Each of them, when confronted with their own words in a recorded, legally documented setting, crumbled. I was not just neutralizing Vivian's witnesses, I was converting them, one by one, into my own. The next domino was Jade. She did not wait for an invitation. She ambushed me outside my office, her face blotchy and swollen from crying, her usual freelance PR polish completely gone. "You have to stop this, Isabel," she hissed, grabbing my arm. I looked at her hand on my coat until she snatched it away. "You are destroying my mother. You are destroying me. I am enforcing a legal document. Jade, your mother destroyed herself." "What does it matter?" she cried, her voice cracking. "It's just money. It's just a house. You have your little project. You have your own money. Why are you doing this to us?" "She assaulted me. She stole $58,200 from my father. I'm not sure which part of that is confusing you." "My clients are dropping me," she said, as if this were the real tragedy. "The rumor is that my mother is being investigated for fraud. My name is on that stupid Ashford design paperwork. Portia isn't even returning my calls. This is my career." She took a shaky breath, trying to compose herself, trying to find a bargaining chip. "Look, just stop. Stop the lawyers. Tell Evan to stand down. We'll be quiet. We won't contest the will. But just let it be quiet. Let us have some dignity. If you do this, I'll make sure no one ever hears about that architect, the one from Boston, the one who left you after 6 weeks. We'll protect your reputation, a trade, dignity for silence." I stared at her. The pathetic, childish attempt at blackmail was almost sad. I reached into my briefcase. I did not pull out a letter. I pulled out a stack of credit card statements. "You want to talk about dignity, Jade?" I fanned them out like a losing poker hand. "This is your mother's dignity charged to my father's Daily Duke business card. $450 for a planning lunch at the club. With you, $800 for event supplies from a boutique in the city. $1,640 for wine for a networking dinner. For the last 6 months, your mother has been using my father's small business account as her personal slush fund, and you've been right there with her. This isn't about dignity, it's about your allowance. You're upset because the bank has finally cut you off." She looked at the statements, her face ashen. She had no idea I had been that thorough. She had no idea I had that too. You wouldn't," she whispered. "That's private." "It's evidence," I said. "Now, I suggest you find your own lawyer." Portia Vale, as I had predicted, did not need to be cornered. She was the smartest of the three. She was a survivor. On Monday afternoon, a press release went out from the Fairview Community Fund, one of the town's largest charitable organizations, which Vivian had clawed her way onto the board of. The board of the Fairview Community Fund has, as of this morning, accepted the resignation of Ms. Portia Vale. Ms. Vale has chosen to step down to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest with her private real estate ventures. The board has also suspended the membership of Mrs. Vivian Ashford Duke, pending a review of a private legal matter. Portia had cut Vivian loose. She had sacrificed her friend to save herself, painting herself as responsible and ethical while simultaneously confirming to the entire town that Vivian was under investigation. The perfect lady facade did not just crack, it shattered. The gossip network went into overdrive. The story was everywhere. Vivian Ashford Duke, the pillar of the community, was a violent fraud. Cornered, bank accounts frozen, and her social standing destroyed. Vivian did the one thing she had left to do. She tried to slander me from the bottom of the hole she was in. She started calling the few people who would still listen, claiming I was the one with the history, that I was unstable, vindictive, that I had a history of volatile relationships. She was trying to poison the well, to paint herself as the victim of a vindictive stepdaughter. I called my father. "I'm coming to the house," I said. "I need to speak with her." When I arrived, my father let me in. The house felt cold, dead. Vivian was in the dining room, sitting at the head of the long, empty table. She looked terrible. Her expensive silk suit was wrinkled. Her hair was a mess. She had been crying, but her eyes were dry and full of hate. "Get out," she hissed. "This is still my home." "It's not," I said. "It's the property of the Marjorie Duke Trust, and I am the administrator. You are a guest here, and your invitation is about to expire." "You're a monster," she spat, "telling everyone lies, turning my friends against me, turning Thomas against me. I'm telling them the truth, Isabel, about you, about what a cold, empty, unlovable thing you really are." I did not respond. I simply reached into my briefcase and pulled out the single sheet of ledger paper my grandmother had left me. I placed it on the table in front of her. "My grandmother left me a list of my investments in this house," I said. "But she also left me a note." Vivian glanced at the paper, her eyes scanning the handwritten script. She wrote, "The honor of a duke is found in restrained hands. You showed your hands on Thanksgiving. Vivian, you showed them to everyone. You have no honor. You have no money. You have no leverage. You are just a vulgar person in a nice house that no longer belongs to you." She looked up at me, her face crumbling, and she turned, in a final, desperate appeal, to my father, who was standing in the doorway, his hands knotted together. Thomas, for God's sake, are you going to let her speak to me this way? After everything I have done for this family? After everything we have built?" My father looked at me, at the bruise on my face, which was now a sickly yellow-green. He looked at the ledger sheet on the table. He looked at this woman who had terrified him into submission for 5 years. And he finally stood up straight. "She is right, Vivian," he said, his voice quiet. But for the first time in his life, it was firm, it was final. This is not a family. This is just what you've done. It's over. I'm choosing my daughter. This family," he said, tapping his chest. "The Duke family. We have rules. You broke every single one of them." That was the end. The final support beam had been kicked out. Later that evening, Evan Rourke's office sent out the last 2 documents. The first was a formal cease and desist order, delivered to Vivian's lawyer, warning her that any further slanderous comments would be met with an immediate, separate lawsuit. The second was a notification for a mandatory, binding mediation session scheduled for the following week. It was no longer a negotiation. It was a formal surrender. My phone, which had been quiet all day, buzzed on my nightstand. It was a text, and another, a stream of frantic, panicked messages from Jade. "Isabel, please. You can't. You've won. You've taken everything. Mother is a wreck. She has nothing. I have nothing. My clients are all gone. Portia won't talk to me. I can't even pay my rent. Please, just stop. Please call me. Tell me what you want. Don't let the lawyers do this to us. Please." I looked at the desperate, tumbling words. I saw the pure, unfiltered panic of a person who had never had to face a single consequence, now facing all of them at once. I took a breath. I typed one short reply. Talk to the lawyer. The mandatory mediation Evan had scheduled was still a week away, but I knew Vivian. She would use that time to spin, to lie, to rally her remaining allies. She was a creature of social warfare, and I could not let her choose the battlefield. My advantage was in the data, the objective, verifiable truth. Her power was in whispers, innuendo, and the collective politeness of Fairview Springs. So I decided to change the venue. My first act as temporary administrator of the trust was not to seize the house or change the locks. It was to hire an independent forensic accounting firm, one from the city with no ties to Fairview Springs. I gave them one directive: audit the last 24 months of all my father's accounts, including his business, and find every dollar that touched Ashford Design Logistics. The report came back in 48 hours. It was worse, and better, than I had imagined. The $58,200 was just the flagship transaction. The auditors found a pattern of smaller, recurring transfers, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, all coded as interior design consultation or project management fees. The total bleed over 2 years was just shy of $110,000. But the real discovery was the ownership. Evan's team had already flagged Portia Vale as the registered agent. The auditors, however, dug deeper, past the agent and the public filings, to the true beneficial owner listed on the LLC's private bank and corporation documents. It was not Portia. It was a woman named Corinne Croft, another member of Vivian's inner circle, her dearest friend, who ran one of the town's most expensive and failing art galleries. The structure was clear. Vivian approved the fraudulent transfers from my father. The money went to Corinne's shell company. Portia, the real estate agent, was the consultant meant to flip the house. It was a conspiracy with 3 heads. And they were all about to be on the same stage. The Fairview Winter Charity Gala was Vivian's crown jewel. It was the social event of the season, a night where she cemented her status as the town's philanthropic queen. This year, it was being held in the grand ballroom of the Fairview Hotel. Astonishingly, despite the legal notices, despite her assets being frozen, she had not canceled. She was planning to attend, to project an image of serene, unbothered strength. She would be surrounded by her friends, cocooned in her natural habitat. She believed no one would dare confront her there. I called Evan. I have a new strategy. Isabel, he sighed. The mediation is set. The judge is on our side. We don't need to be theatrical. Vivian is theatrical, I said. She lives and breathes for an audience. I'm going to give her one. I need you to draft a new document. The trap was simple. I had Evan draft a second-phase renovation agreement. It was, on its surface, a settlement proposal. It was hyper-transparent. It outlined, in excruciating detail, every fraudulent charge. It stipulated that Vivian and Jade would vacate the house, that Vivian would publicly apologize, and that the $110,000 would be repaid from her personal, SunTrust assets. In exchange, I would agree to a full non-disclosure agreement and not pursue the moral turpitude claim any further. It was a mercy. It was an offer to let her walk away with her reputation in tatters, but not in prison. I had Evan send it to her lawyer, with a note. Isabel is willing to end this. She proposes signing this final agreement at the Winter Gala, to show a united front and end the rumors. She will even be making the keynote sponsor speech. Her lawyer, knowing his client was cornered, agreed. They saw it as a lifeline, a way to spin this as a family misunderstanding that was now resolved. They thought I was offering them a stage for their comeback. They forgot who builds the stage. I arrived at the gala with my father. He was terrified, his hands trembling, but he was resolute. He wore his best suit, and for the first time, he stood straight. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and expensive gowns. Vivian was near the entrance, her smile brittle, her eyes darting. She was in a striking, severe red dress. Jade was beside her, looking pale and nervous. Portia Vale and Corinne Croft were holding court at the main bar, projecting confidence. They all looked at me as I entered, a flicker of triumph in their eyes. They thought I had come to surrender. The dinner was tense. The idle chatter was strained. Finally, the event coordinator, a nervous young man, walked to the podium. And now, for a few words from one of our most generous sponsors, a true pillar of the Fairview community, the CEO of Northline Structures, Ms. Isabel Duke. A polite, lukewarm applause. I walked to the stage, my heels clicking on the parquet. I adjusted the microphone. A massive screen was lit behind me, showing the gala's logo. "Good evening," I said. My voice was amplified, filling every corner of the vast room. "Thank you for coming. Tonight, we're talking about foundations. The foundations our town is built on, the infrastructure that keeps us safe, and the foundations of trust." Vivian, seated at the head table, smiled graciously. She thought I was speaking in metaphors. "As a major sponsor, I'm here to say thank you," I continued. "To those who truly support our community, and in the spirit of transparency, which is the bedrock of all good infrastructure, I'd like to acknowledge our key supporters publicly." I clicked the remote. The gala logo vanished. In its place was my spreadsheet. "A special acknowledgement," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the ice water on the tables. "To Ashford Design Logistics, a shell company, owned by Corinne Croft." Corinne's face, at the bar, went white. "And managed by Portia Vale. This entity received $110,000 over 24 months from my father's accounts, disguised as interior consulting." The room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. "Here," I clicked. "Are the invoices?" The screen filled with the blurry, fraudulent receipts. "And here," I clicked again, "is the bank transfer for $58,200 for a kitchen I had already paid to rewire." "For those who prefer a more visual confirmation of how this household was being managed," I said, "we have this." I clicked the remote. The screen went black, and then it filled with the reflection from the china cabinet. The sound of my own voice. "No," followed by the hideous, sharp crack of the slap, amplified by the hotel's PA system. It echoed off the walls. Several people gasped. Mrs. Davies dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the floor. I clicked again, the impact log from my smartwatch. Impact detected, 7:54 p.m., November 28th. I clicked one last time. The text was stark white on a black background. Section 4 of the Marjorie Family Trust, the Morality Addendum. "Commit an act of public violence in the presence of third-party witnesses, rights, shall be immediately and irrevocably forfeit." I let the words hang in the air for a full 10 seconds. "The house lights," I said to the technician booth. "Could you bring them up, just a little? I want to see everyone." The lights came up, not full, but enough to illuminate the faces of the guests. I saw Ron Fitzsimmons, looking like he was going to be sick. I saw Corinne Croft, already halfway to the exit, and I saw Portia Vale. Portia was not looking at me. She was staring at her phone, her fingers flying in a furious text. She was a survivor. She knew a sinking ship. A moment later, the event coordinator in the back of the room looked at his own phone, his face paling in horror. He whispered to his assistant. Portia Vale, the event's primary underwriter, had just this second pulled her entire $500,000 pledge for the new hospital wing. She was cutting her losses, live, in front of everyone. The sound of a chair scraping back. Vivian. She was rushing the stage, her face a mask of pure primal fury, her red dress like a signal flare. She grabbed a secondary microphone from the band's empty stand. "She is lying!" Vivian shrieked, her voice cracking, feeding back through the speakers. "She's sabotaging me. This is private family business. You are destroying my life. This is slander." Every single microphone in the room, from the podium to the band's audio setup, was live, recording her hysterical public confession of my motive. I held up my hand, and the room quieted, waiting. This is not slander. Vivian, this is an ultimatum. I looked directly at her. You have two choices. 1. You sign a full public apology tonight. You repay every dollar you and Corinne stole, and you withdraw all claims on the Duke assets and vacate the house by noon tomorrow. If you do that, the moral turpitude claim is held in abeyance. We handle the rest quietly. I paused, then looked out at the 200 horrified witnesses. Or, 2, you refuse, and we proceed with the full petition in open court, using the evidence you've all just seen, plus the audio of this outburst. Vivian was trembling, speechless, clutching the microphone. It was Jade who broke. She ran toward the stage, her face a mess of tears and running mascara, her hands outstretched. "Stop it! Just stop! You've won!" she sobbed, clinging to the stage bunting. We knew about the stupid box. We knew about the stupid clause." Vivian's head snapped toward her. "Jade, shut up." "But we didn't think you could open it," Jade wailed, her voice a desperate, childish cry. "We thought no one could ever open the Thanksgiving box. It was just a stupid story. My clients are gone. I have nothing." A collective, horrified murmur went through the crowd. This was no longer a presentation. It was a public execution. My father, who had been standing at the side of the stage, pale but breathing, walked stiffly to the main podium. He stood next to me. He took the microphone from my hand. His own was shaking, but his voice was clear. "My daughter," he said, his voice booming through the ballroom, "has my 100% full support. I have seen the evidence. I have seen the truth." He looked at Vivian, and for the first time, he held her gaze. "And just for the record, I am not signing anything tonight." He placed the microphone back on the stand. The event coordinator and 2 hotel security guards were suddenly on stage, their faces apologetic. "Mr. Duke, Ms. Duke, please, we must ask you to take this matter privately." We were escorted off the stage, walking past Vivian, who had collapsed onto the steps, and Jade, who was weeping uncontrollably. We walked out of the ballroom, through the stunned, silent crowd. The gala was in ruins, the charity's funding was gone, and the entire social structure of Fairview Springs had just been put on trial. The verdict was in. The gala was a public execution. The days that followed were the systematic, legal dismantling. The dominoes, which I had carefully lined up, began to fall, one after another, in a rapid, cascading click, click, click. The morning after the gala, at 9 a.m. sharp, Evan Rourke was not at mediation. He was at the county courthouse. The United Front proposal was off the table, replaced by what he called the shock and awe petition. He filed for an emergency ex parte hearing. He presented the judge with the full, finalized package: the Marjorie Duke Trust Addendum, the bank's official attestation of the safe deposit box access logs, confirming my entry on the exact date stipulated by the trust, Black Friday, proving the conditions were met, the complete forensic accounting report detailing the $110,000 in fraudulent transfers to Corinne Croft's shell company, the high-definition video from the Nest Hub, the audio from the Sonos speaker, the time-stamped impact log from my smartwatch, and, as a final, devastating blow, a compressed file of Jade's hysterical public confession at the gala, recorded by 3 different smartphones and the hotel's own audio-visual team. He filed 2 motions. First, for an immediate confirmation of the will's self-executing forfeiture clause, and second, for a temporary restraining order and asset preservation, freezing every account associated with Vivian, Jade, Portia, and Corinne Croft, pending a full civil fraud hearing. At the same time, I took the video file of the slap, the clean, clear, undeniable footage from the Nest Hub, to the Fairview Springs Police Department. I did not go to press charges in a fit of rage. I went to file a report. as calmly as if I were reporting a stolen piece of equipment from a job site. The desk sergeant, a woman who looked bored with her morning, watched the file on her monitor. Her boredom evaporated. She watched it twice. "That's," she said, "incredibly clear." "Yes," I said. "I have the location, the exact time, and a list of 12 independent witnesses, including a bank vice president." "Did you require medical attention?" "No, but I am requesting a formal report be filed for battery and domestic violence. I need the act itself to be on the public record." She understood. This was not a domestic squabble. This was legal documentation. The police filed the report. Given the nature of the evidence, a charge of simple assault was opened. There was no immediate arrest. This was not that kind of fight. But the legal fact of the assault was now officially entered into the state's criminal database. Vivian Ashford Duke now had a police file. The next domino, the social world, the Fairview Community Fund, which had been humiliated at its own gala, moved with ruthless speed. Portia Vale's resignation was old news. By noon, their board of directors, which included Charles Albright, one of my now very cooperative witnesses, issued a formal public statement. It was brutal. Due to a clear and egregious violation of our ethics and conduct policies, and in light of recent verified information regarding financial misconduct and criminal complaints, the board has voted unanimously and with immediate effect to permanently remove Mrs. Vivian Ashford Duke from her position. The fund is cooperating fully with legal counsel to review any and all charitable contributions associated with her. They had publicly branded her a criminal. The perfect lady was not just shunned, she was excommunicated. This, in turn, set off Jade's personal apocalypse. Her freelance PR career was built entirely on her mother's contacts and reputation. Her clients were the very people who had been in that ballroom, or who had heard about it by breakfast. Her phone calls started, then the texts. They were no longer the pleading messages of the previous week. They were the raw, unfiltered screams of a drowning person. "They're all gone. Isabel. Every single one. Even the dental spa. They said they can't be associated with me. My landlord just issued a default notice. The rent check bounced. The accounts are all frozen. You did this. Please, Isabel, I am begging you. Tell the papers it was a mistake. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I'll pay you back. I'll get a real job. Just tell them to leave me alone. You have to keep it quiet. You can't. You can't ruin me like this. It's not fair." I did not respond. I simply forwarded the entire message thread to Evan, time-stamped and logged. The most important domino fell on Wednesday morning. The judge, having reviewed Evan's petition, issued his ruling. It was a complete victory. The court officially recognized the validity of the Marjorie Family Trust's morality clause. It ruled that Vivian's actions, as documented by video and witness testimony, had unambiguously triggered the forfeiture. The court order appointed me, Isabel Duke, as the sole temporary administrator of the entire trust and all its assets. All plans to sell the house were immediately and legally terminated. Vivian was, in the eyes of the law, no longer a resident. She was a tenant at sufferance, with no rights, in my house. That afternoon, my father came to my Northline Structures office. He did not go to Evan's office. He came to my turf, my world of steel and concrete. He was holding a file. He looked drained, but he also looked light. The shame had been replaced by a quiet, determined resolve. "I spoke to my own lawyer, Isabel," he said, sitting across from my drafting table. He reviewed everything, the will, the police report, the audit. He slid a document across the table. It was a durable financial power of attorney. "I'm signing it over to you, everything, the Daily Duke accounts, my personal checking, all of it. I can't. I'm not qualified to protect it." It was the most honest, painful, and brave thing I had ever heard him say. "I don't want to run your business, Dad," I said gently. "I know," he said. "I want you to protect it. You know how to build walls." I co-signed the document, We walked to the bank together. We closed every joint account. We closed every card associated with Vivian. I separated the Daily Duke into its own ironclad LLC, funded by the trust, and issued my father a new debit card linked only to that. The spending was over. The bleed was stopped. He was, finally, financially free. Vivian's lawyer, a pit bull from a downtown firm who was likely working on a long-gone retainer, made one final, desperate lunge. He filed a counter motion, arguing against the forfeiture. His entire case rested on a single word: provocation. His argument was that I had intentionally and maliciously created an environment of extreme emotional distress, that I had goaded his client into a regrettable but understandable human reaction. He claimed I was the aggressor, and that Vivian was the victim of a calculated campaign of familial harassment. Evan's response was surgical. He did not argue emotion. He submitted data. First, he submitted the diagnostic log from my smartwatch. Your Honor, his brief read, the data shows 0, and I repeat, 0, high-impact or aggressive movements from my client. It does, however, show a high G-force impact to her, consistent with an unprovoked high-velocity strike. Second, he submitted the sworn, notarized affidavits from Ron Fitzsimmons, Charles Albright, and Ann Davies, all three, now terrified of being implicated in the fraud investigation, stated the same thing. At no point did Isabel Duke raise her voice. At no point did she make a threatening gesture. The assault by Mrs. Ashford Duke was unprovoked and shocking. The provocation argument was not just dismissed, it was annihilated. The Fairview Springs Gazette, which had been circling the story for a week, finally ran its piece. They had the police report, they had the community fund's public statement, they had the court filing. The front page, above the fold, was a picture of me from a Northline press event, hard hat in hand, superimposed next to a photo of Vivian from the now infamous gala. The headline was not the salacious trash Vivian's lawyer had hoped for. It was cold, precise, and devastating. Engineer uses law, data to expose fraud, assault, Duke family trust seized. The article praised me, contrasting my calm, evidence-based approach with Vivian's public violence. It painted me as a builder, a protector, someone who used legal frameworks instead of brute force. My grandmother would have been proud. The story was the final, killing blow for Jade. She was radioactive. No one in town would hire her. No one would even rent her an apartment. Her panic turned into a full-scale meltdown. That night, my inbox chimed. It was an email from Jade. It was not a text. It was a novel, a long, rambling, hysterical, 3,000-word manifesto. She accused me of premeditated cruelty. She accused my father of being a spineless coward. She accused Portia and Corinne of abandoning her. And in her rage, she confessed. She wrote it all down. We had to find a way to get that money. Mother deserved that house. She earned it. You never even lived there. That $58,200 was just sitting there. You didn't even need it. It was easy to make the invoices. Portia said it was standard practice. Corinne's gallery was failing. We were helping a friend. We knew about the stupid trust. Mother tried to get your father to break it for years, but she never thought you'd figure it out. She never thought you'd get in that box. You were always too busy with your stupid, dirty roads. It was a full, written confession to conspiracy to commit fraud. It was the lever I did not even know I needed. I did not reply. I did not forward it to Evan. I saved it. I exported the email, with its full, verifiable headers, as a PDF. I saved it to my private, encrypted cloud, in a folder labeled Leverage. The legal battle was over. The coming mediation was just a formality. But this was for later. This was insurance, a tool I would keep in reserve. Just in case. It was the guarantee of a humane and final surrender. The final mediation was not a negotiation. It was a signing ceremony. We did not meet in a neutral conference room. At Evan's request, we were convened in a formal hearing room at the county courthouse. presided over by a retired Superior Court judge who was acting as the binding arbitrator. Vivian, Jade, and their pale, defeated lawyer sat at one polished oak table. My father, Evan, and I sat at the other. The air was heavy, silent, and cold. Evan stood. He did not address Vivian. He addressed the judge. Your Honor, my client, Ms. Isabel Duke, in her capacity as administrator of the Marjorie Duke Trust, is here to accept the full and unconditional surrender of the defendant. We have 3 non-negotiable requirements for the final decree. He held up one finger. 1. Vivian Ashford Duke will immediately and permanently waive all rights, current and future, to the Marjorie Duke Trust, including all property, assets, and stipends, acknowledging the forfeiture clause was triggered by her own actions. He held up a second. 2. Vivian Ashford Duke and her co-conspirators, Jade Ashford, Portia Vale, and Corinne Croft, will, within 60 days, make restitution of the $110,000 fraudulently removed from the Duke family accounts. We are, as a courtesy, not pursuing criminal fraud charges at this time, provided the restitution is made in full. He held up a third. 3. A formal, public apology will be drafted by our office. Mrs. Ashford Duke will sign it. Acknowledging her violent actions and the financial misconduct, it will be published, at her expense, in the Fairview Springs Gazette within 24 hours. Vivian's lawyer stood, his voice reedy. Your Honor, we find these terms punitive. My client, while regrettable in her actions, was under extreme emotional duress. She was provoked. The judge, an older man with sharp, tired eyes, held up his hand. It stopped the lawyer cold. Counselor, the judge said, his voice gravel, I have reviewed the evidence package. I have seen the video. I have read the trust. I have heard the audio of the defendant's subsequent public statements at the gala. The provocation argument is not only insulting to the court, it is legally non-existent. The act was clear. The trust is clear. He looked at Vivian, his gaze like a scalpel. The behavior stipulated in the addendum, public violence, third-party witnesses, was met precisely. The forfeiture of all rights is absolute. It is self-executed. The only reason we are here is to discuss the manner of your exit. Mrs. Duke, not the fact of it. Vivian, who had been staring at her hands, looked up, her eyes blazing with a final desperate spark of defiance. You can't just throw me out. The house is mine. It's marital property. I live there. No, you do not, I said. It was the first time I had spoken. The room looked at me. I reached into my briefcase. Your Honor, there is one final piece of documentation, a second codicil to my grandmother's will. Notarized and filed with the original. It was located in the same safe deposit box. It seems my grandmother was not just thorough, she was prophetic. I handed the single sheet of paper to Evan, who handed it to the judge. The judge read it silently, his eyebrows rising. He looked at me, then back at the paper. He read it aloud. It is a holographic codicil, the judge stated, his voice now holding a trace of awe. Dated January 10th, 2018, it reads, Should any person strike my granddaughter, Isabel, in my home on the Thanksgiving holiday, I direct my trustee to hand the keys to that house, all keys, directly to her. It is hers. The debate is over. The room was silent. The lawyer sat down, heavily. Jade let out a small, choked sob. Vivian, she just collapsed. It was not a faint. It was a structural failure. Her spine seemed to dissolve. The rage, the defiance, the arrogance, all of it evaporated, leaving an empty, wrinkled silk suit sitting upright in a chair. She was nothing. A ghost. Jade was the first to speak, her voice a terrified whisper. 30 days. Everyone looked at her. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her pale face. She looked at me, not the judge. Isabel, please, we have nothing. The accounts are frozen. We have nowhere to go. We can't be on the street tonight. Just 30 days to find a place, to pack, please." I looked at her, this young woman who had mocked me, attacked me, and confessed to helping defraud my family. I saw no remorse, only pure, practical terror. 30 days, I said, on 3 conditions. 1, you will not speak to, call, or otherwise contact my father. 2, you will not remove a single item from the house that was not purchased specifically by you or your mother, and you will provide receipts for any item you take. 3, you will be out by noon on the 30th day. If you are not, I will have the sheriff remove you. "We agree," Jade whispered, nodding frantically, grabbing her mother's limp hand. "We agree." A court officer stepped forward, placing 3 documents on Vivian's table: the waiver, the restitution agreement, the apology. "Sign," he said. With a shaking, spidery hand, Vivian Ashford Duke signed her life away. The transfer of power was not a celebration. It was a sterile administrative procedure. Back in the hearing room, my father stood before the judge and the court officer. He placed his own ring of keys on the table: the key to the front door, the key to the back, the key to the workshop, the key to the old filing cabinets. Thomas Duke," he said, his voice shaking but clear, "as the former trustee, do hereby acknowledge the activation of the trust addendum and willingly transfer all assets and responsibilities to the new administrator, Isabel Duke." It was legal. It was final. He was free. The last of the dominoes fell the next day. A letter arrived at Evan's office, not from a lawyer, but from Portia Vale herself. It was a masterwork of self-preservation. She claimed to be horrified and betrayed by her former friends, Vivian and Corinne. She claimed she was only a passive agent for the LLC and had no knowledge of the internal financial arrangements. With the letter came a cashier's check for $60,000, her portion of the fraud, which she was voluntarily refunding to the Fairview Community Fund to make amends for the damage done to the town's reputation. She was not apologizing. She was buying her way back into the town's good graces. Corinne Croft, ruined and facing her own bankruptcy, would be left to repay the rest. With the trust secure, my first act as administrator was to write 2 checks. The first was from the Marjorie Duke Trust account, payable to Isabel Duke. The amount was $58,200. The memo line read, "Repayment of secured debt, 11.2319, per addendum." I was not taking money. I was settling my grandmother's account. The second check was from my own personal account. I drove it down to my father's coffee shop. He was there, alone, wiping down the counters, the open sign shining brightly. "What's this?" he asked. "It's the future," I said. I handed him the check. "I'm establishing a new community fund in grandmother's name, the Marjorie Duke Community Coffee Fund. It's an endowment for the shop. It's enough to guarantee your bean supply, your rent, and your payroll, forever. You never have to worry about money again. You just have to make the coffee." He looked at the check, then at me, his eyes full. He did not say anything. He just hugged me, his arms tight around me, and for the first time, I felt the strength in his grip. The apology was published that afternoon, on page A7 of the Gazette. It was 3 sentences of cold, lawyer-drafted text. "I, Vivian Ashford Duke, do hereby publicly apologize to Isabel Duke for my actions on Thanksgiving. I acknowledge I engaged in financial misconduct and committed an act of physical violence. I deeply regret the incident." I heard from Evan that she had tried to make one last statement on the courthouse steps, claiming she was a victim of a broken system and family prejudice. But when she spoke, the local news reporters, sensing she was no longer the story, simply lowered their microphones and walked away. Her mic was, finally, off. As I left my office that night, I pulled up a file on my computer. It was the draft of my own lawsuit, the one I had prepared before the gala, the vindictive one. It included the fraud charges. It included the assault. It included Jade's hysterical, confessing email. It was designed to ruin them, to pursue them into bankruptcy, to salt the earth. I stared at it for a long moment. I had won. The house was secure. My father was safe. The money was returned. My grandmother's will was executed. I did not need it. This was not revenge. This was structural integrity. This was order. I dragged the file to the trash bin and clicked empty. That evening, I let myself into the house on Willow. It was cold, silent. The 30 days were not yet up, but they were gone. They had taken their clothes and their personal effects and vanished, leaving the heavy, sterile white kitchen behind. It was the first time I had been in this room since that night. The scene of the crime, the battlefield, the setting sun, a deep, late autumn gold, was streaming through the windows, pouring across the white marble island. I had a small box with me. I reached in and pulled out a simple, silver-framed photograph. It was my grandmother, Marjorie, taken 20 years ago. She was looking at the camera not with a smile, but with that familiar, shrewd, all-knowing gaze. I placed the frame on the empty white kitchen shelf. The golden light hit the glass, illuminating her face. The house was still. It was perfectly, wonderfully quiet. The noise, the performance, the chaos had finally left. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where are you listening from? I would love to hear your thoughts on Vivian and Jade, so please comment below. And if you enjoy real-life revenge stories like this one, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.